Hello my friends. So this is chapter 15 of A Look in the Dark, and this is the third part of that chapter, and the chapter is called Irish Secrets. You remember in the last episode Danny and Carol had been visiting a man called Jimmy Kendall, who'd got mixed up, kind of reluctantly, in the illegal wildlife trade, perhaps without realising how serious it was. You know, my friends, this book was produced in 1981, Saving the Animals. It's got a foreword by the Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. It's got information in the front by Peter Scott. Excuse me. Lots of information. Some of it about poaching and other threats to wildlife. But since then, tremendous profit has been made out of the illegal wildlife trade. And it continues to be the case. So that's really why I wrote this story. Although we know there's a better answer than the Newman answer, it's still sad and interesting to look into this. So Danny and Carol are driving on their route out of Belfast. As Danny followed Carol's directions along the Albert Ridge Road and back toward Ravenhill Road, Carol praised her husband for his ingenuity in gleaning so much information. "Am I married to Holmes or 007? She asked. Danny laughed, but then in a serious tone he said, "Trouble is, Carol, people like Jimmy Kendall get mixed up in this kind of thing and even have some scruples, but once they're in, if they're careless, they can be the ones that end up dead. As we know, not all the folk in the illegal trade are as nice in personality as that man seemed to be." Carol silently prayed that both Jimmy Kendall and they themselves would escape the fate that Stanners had no hesitation in delivering to anyone who would be a threat to his freedom. 1 hour later they were sitting in Angus Cochrane's shop sipping very nice cappuccino and enjoying pastries that were as good as Carol's mother's home-baked cakes. The view out across Ardclass Harbour in County Down was both pleasant and interesting. Around the other side of the round table sat 4 men, obviously from the fishing boats, and they were enjoying a joke about another fisherman who was not there to defend himself. The laughter seemed a bit shallow, and the glance between the greens was enough for each one to know that the other did not like this light-hearted pleasure about another man's marriage problems. "Another cup, Carol?" After shaking her head, Carol said, "What about a walk round the harbour?" As they examined the boats, they couldn't find one named Mariner Millie, but that was not a problem really. Not all the boats were in, it seemed, and in this fine weather it would be unsurprising if the boat was engaged in its legitimate business in the Irish Sea somewhere. They had no reason to presume that Jimmy Kendall had just plucked a name out of his imagination, so the name of a vessel could be written up with everything else they were going to put in a report of their trip to Ireland. As they turned the car round at the harbour, Carol asked, "Would you like to see some seals, Danny boy?" "Just point me in the right direction." "Remember Clocky Rocks?" "Well, it's just a few miles around the coast." They drove past the Bishop Court RAF base, which Carol announced was part of the early warning system. "Great," Danny said. "I expect we get that so that the Western nations can launch their missiles, and then as we're incinerated, we will have the indescribable joy of knowing that our Soviet counterparts will be fried soon afterwards. Are we mad worrying about a few birds?" Danny didn't expect an answer to that, and he didn't get one. But Carol, now in thoughtful mood, did pass a related comment a few moments later. "You know, Dan, I've read that this beautiful sea out here is the most radioactive in the world. And that's prior to any nuclear war." "It makes you mad, Carol. Most of us humans have an appreciation for the beauty of it all, but the way we're going will make it uninhabitable for even a blade of grass." He stopped to admire the view of the opening into Strangford Loch. "Do you ever think we should be out protesting instead of investigating?" "No, I don't." Carol took her man's hands. "There's a lot of sincere protesters out there, but what does it lead to? The civil rights movement here met with opposition to some very reasonable demands. Beat peaceful protesters around the head with a wooden baton and they're not peaceful next time. They bring rocks. Next time some of them bring petrol bombs, and the time after that they've joined the IRA. And then they viewed what was at first a protest as a just war. Bloody Sunday in Derry and the backlash from the loyalists followed. No, I like the idea of investigating. We're doing something and it's working. We hope. Dan, we can't stop nuclear weapons, though we both would like to. But we can concentrate on the bit we know about. Maybe someone else will blow the whistle on the nuclear arms history, but this seems to be where we fit in. Do you think, Carol, that either Maggie Thatcher or Fidel Castro give a darn about laughing gulls or bullfinches? Maybe not. But in your writing, you're reaching some folk, making them think. That and the investigation is what we can do. Are you having doubts? No, just need a bit of reassurance. I was reluctant to get into this, and you know I've got no confidence. Rubbish. At Jimmy Kendall's you displayed great confidence, so you did. You did the same with Sean and the IRA. Come on, let's forget the world's troubles and enjoy the seals for a while. Parking the car at Clocky Rocks at the opening of Strangford Lock, the young investigators took time out to watch the grey seals on the semi-submerged rocks a short distance from the shore. Danny counted 65, but Carol made it 67, so they compromised and recorded 66. Wise creatures that the seals are, they spend much of their time in this location, because Strangford Lock, being like a bottle and having it tied up to 8 knots through its neck, the food's coming to them as they fish in this region. A short scan of the mudflats around Clocky Rock and they saw shelldocks, red-breasted mergansers, curlews, redshanks, oystercatchers, lapwings, herons, a black-tailed godwit. Seeing the seals and the birds helped Danny get what they were doing back in sharp focus again. Being there at one with nature brought back the optimistic frame of mind, and he knew that he would fight for the preservation of any one of those birds and for those seals. Picking up her husband's mood, Carol said, "You know, Dan, as you sweep the binoculars across the region and smell the sea and the gentle breeze, hear the call of the birds and examine this beautiful scenery, it makes you feel that us mere humans will never be allowed to destroy it all." Danny nodded and grunted his agreement. He was giving most of his attention to identifying a distant wader. Carol zipped up her light jacket in response to the cold breeze rising off the water. She saw a better response from her husband as the identified bird flew away. If all these ecosystems have been woven together in such harmony, it seems senseless to think that we could just tip it all over and into destruction. Danny lowered his binoculars and looked into the pretty green eyes turned toward him. That seems reasonable. If us clumsy humans have an early warning system to tell us we're on the eve of nuclear destruction, surely the great mind behind all this, he pointed toward the sea lock, it would seem that the great mind would also have an early warning system. God, you mean? I suppose I do. But we've got an incredible potential for destruction. Aye, Danny. And it takes a great deal of intelligence to create, and so little to destroy. Explain what you mean. Well, the Linen Hall Library in Belfast is famous, right? It is. Well, if you say so. Dan, I took you there the last time we were over, the day we got rained off. Oh, you mean the place in the middle of Belfast with all the books? Old books. Libraries tend to be like that, Dan. You need to read more, dear. She gave him a kiss as they turned to walk back to the car. Well, anyway, the collective learning, intelligence, wisdom and creativity in that one library represents many years of work. Danny nodded and Carol drew the contrast. But one buck idiot with a box of matches could probably destroy it all in a couple of hours. You should know you lot are always burning things. Oh, so Cromwell was Irish, was he? Well, the RAF had Irish pilots flying over Dresden, did they? She screwed her face up, gave him a shove and ran onto the car. Danny chased the laughing girl, but she beat him to the car, jumped in and locked the doors. Do you say my point? She shouted through the glass of the door. Danny acknowledged that he did, and she opened the door, insisting it was time she took the wheel. Driving from Strangford through the picture book scenery around Hope and Saul, where St Patrick was reputed to have built his first church, they were soon out of Downpatrick, on the way to Annacloy and going toward Ballynahinch. Danny sat back to listen to Joan Baez singing songs of war, peace and protest, and he probably would have slept to the sound of her glass crystal voice, but he grumbled that the chosen route of his wife was the worst road in Ireland. Carol replied that the scenery on the road through Dromore and Lurgan was so beautiful that it compensated for the twists and rises, lurches and bumps. She also promised him that he could find worse roads in Ireland, and when he suggested that she slow down a bit, she had no choice when they were delayed by a slow-moving tractor for 2 or 3 miles. Soon they were back on the motorway though, and it seemed a very short time to travel from Lurgan to the family farm near Dungannon. On the way, Carol was reviewing in her mind the progress of the investigation, and her thoughts met up somewhere with Ricky Claymore's thoughts as he too reviewed the progress on the English side of the Irish Sea, or at least in his case as he walked in Weymouth on the shore of the English Channel. Sir Richard was feeling like a bear after honey. He had concluded that he would have to find out more about the Geographic Council for better understanding, phoning the Bath National Office. He'd located branches around the south coast and decided to pay a visit to the Bournemouth establishment. So what was Ricky playing at? Next episode will tell you that, my friends. In the meantime, Danny and Carol have been to Belfast. They've investigated some things there. They've been down to Ardglass to look at the boats. Haven't found the one that's used by Jimmy to smuggle things in and out of Ireland. But nonetheless, they feel they're making some progress, gathering things together as regards their investigation into things going on in Ireland. Ricky, in the meantime, is looking into this charity that has some connection with Stanhurst. There's a lot of evil people out there, isn't there? People who try to be powerful, who are greedy, and who often make it look like they're doing a good thing when they're actually doing a bad thing. That's sad. And Stanhurst is certainly a fictional character that's like that. Well, my friends, it's nice to share my writing thoughts with you, and I appreciate very much that you listen. I'd like to say thank you for doing that. And I'd like to send our love to you, and thank you for your patience for listening. Bye bye for now, my friends. Next episode to follow soon. Bye bye.